Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Beauty in the Eye of the Beholder, Fashion and Sustainability. I am Shelley Rogers, the coordinator of Artists for the Earth at earthday.org. And earthday.org is very proud today to be collaborating with our partner, the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network, founded by Carrie Bannigan. The Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network is an online platform for industry stakeholders, NGOs, and governments to showcase their actions, report progress, and share solutions to accelerate the sector's contribution in delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. We are very proud today to have an esteemed moderator in Lucia Brigham, who is the Chief of Office at the United Nations Office for Partnership and a leading collaborator of the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network. We are also honored today to have three distinguished panelists who are all, I'd say, champions for the earth, because each of them, as you will see in their individual way, are working to change the trajectory of the fashion industry today. For over half a century, earthday.org has been fighting the good fight on every environmental issue as one of the leading environmental organizations in the world. But it is really shocking for most people to learn how very much the fashion industry contributes to every single one of these environmental issues. Fashion is really a creative field. We have fun with fashion. We as purchasers of fashion express our own creativity, our individuality. We can project how we feel and how we want to be seen. And it's really a fun and creative outlet for many people. But when you lift the curtain on that fashion runway and look behind it, you will see a very different story. The fashion industry pollutes the air heavily with carbon emissions. It destroys fresh water 20% annually with hazardous chemicals that are deleterious to all life on Earth. It fills our oceans with millions and millions of microplastics in the production and the washing of synthetic clothing, and we contribute to this ourselves when we wash those clothes in our own washing machine. It damages soil with unsustainable agricultural practices, and it contributes heavily to biodiversity loss and deforestation with the clear cutting for farming of animals for textiles and other animal products that we use in our clothing. It conservatively makes a whopping 100 billion garments every year, and the majority of that will end up in a landfill or an incinerator. Very little is left over for reuse and resale. And finally, this is an industry that ignores millions and millions of people working in mostly developing countries who toil with under the strain of hazardous conditions and backbreaking work, not for what we call a living wage, but often barely that country's minimum wage. And that is why our clothing is so very inexpensive. So today, in conclusion, earthday.org heartily welcomes our moderator and our three panelists. We take our hats off to them because they and others like them who work in this field are working in the heart of the apparel industry to change it. And they are really a big part of our hope for the future of the fashion industry and for our planet. So welcome all of you. We're so happy to see you. And now over to you, Lucia.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Shelley, for the introduction. It is my pleasure to join you today, and I would like to thank the Earth Day Network and also the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network for organizing this webinar focused on fashion and sustainability. Earlier this month, at the opening of the United Nations General Assembly, our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said that the climate alarm bells are ringing at fever pitch. The recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was a code red for humanity. Scorching temperatures, shocking biodiversity loss, polluted air, water, natural spaces. But at the same speech, the Secretary General also emphasized that the problem we have created are problems we can solve. Right? Humanity has shown that we can do capable things when we work together. And we need the entire fashion industry to rethink its way of doing business, considering both the human and environmental implications of the operations, meeting labor standards, and adapting sustainable consumption and production practices. And that is what our discussion will be today. As you mentioned, Shelley, we have with us three leading experts that have been driving change within the fashion industry. I'm proud to present Laria Pepper, the CEO of Textile Exchange. We have with us also Maxine Bedev. She is the director of New Standard Institute. And our third speaker is Louis Perkins, a president of Apparel Impact Institute. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. I would like to invite you to share questions for the panelists throughout the conversations. We will have some time dedicated at the end of the conversation for Q&A, but we would like to encourage you to share the questions as they come up. So we'll try to integrate them in our conversation throughout the entire webinar. And with that, I would like to move to our first speaker, Laria Pepper. Laria, yeah, hello, how are you?
Great to be here. Thank you.
Good to see you. I understand you are calling in from Texas. That's where your roots are. And you're a legend. You have raised, it's true. You have accomplished so much. And you were raised by a family of cotton farmers. I believe that you represent the fifth generation.
That's correct.
And excellent. And you have moved from the traditional cotton farming to organic farming, right? And then you, with your late husband, co-founded the Texas Organic Cotton Marketing Cooperative. And this cooperative became the largest organic cotton cooperative in the United States. Then you decided to help create and market and distribution to support the cotton farmers. And you started two businesses, the Organic Essentials, right, for personal care products, and Cotton Plus. And now you are, because it wasn't enough, you decided to co-found the Textile Exchange. You are currently the CEO. The Textile Exchange is a global nonprofit that creates leaders in the preferred fiber and materials industry. So my first question, my warm-up question to you is, what was the trigger point in your life that led you to the trajectory of organic cotton farming? What led you to shift from this traditional from the traditional farming to the organic path?
Well, that's good because it's a convergence of, life's experiences. So at the time I grew up, my grandfather was a very old-fashioned farmer. We didn't use the insecticides or the pesticides or the fungicides. When other farmers started in the 1950s and 60s in the United States with that industrial revolution, my grandfather was no part of it. So it was one of those things of, naturally I'm an organic farmer because of my heritage and, how I was taught to farm, and I didn't know any better. But my husband and I started farming in 1979, kind of at the convergence of the farm crisis, the time of, there was not a national organic program at that time. So in the 1980s, it's like, do we continue to be a part of the problem or part of the solution? So we became very engaged in the national organic program, the harmonization of standards in the United States when the national organic program was launched in 1990. And we were one of the first cotton farms to be certified in 1991. And so it was a natural progression of trying to find a place where our farm could be viable. And again, part of the long-term solution and vision for agriculture to be a thriving and resilient place for families, for us to grow our food and our fiber. So just kind of a progression kind of thing that happened.
Yeah. Thank you. The next natural question is tell us a little bit more about Textile Exchange. It's such a fascinating organization, right? And we would like to, can you help us understand what is the process? Can you explain the process and the journey of getting certified with Textile Exchange? What is it that you do exactly?
We came together as a collective of people. Initially, we were the Organic Exchange, and the fiber focus was organic cotton. We felt that we wear a lot of fiber, we wear a lot of cotton, and cotton grown organically would address issues around soils, around fair labor and wages, that organic cotton had the mechanisms to really address the pollution, the poverty, and the problems that were associated with the current paradigm. So we created a group with a nonprofit to say we need to have better information. We can't act alone. We need to address barriers to growth and do that together in a connected collective strategy. And that evolved. So we were the Organic Exchange for about 10 years, and we'll be celebrating 20 years next year. We became Textile Exchange in 2010 because a lot of the brands and retailers we're working with, they weren't just, we as consumers don't wear just one fiber. We're wearing polyester, we're wearing wool, we're wearing down, we're wearing, we're sleeping in down and cotton and other fibers. And so the things that we were learning about organic cotton, about responsibility in production, about best practices, about having a chain of custody to make confident, have confidence in the claims that we're going to consumers, all the things that we learned around organic cotton, we needed to do around this, around other fibers as well, because brands have a portfolio and we needed to have a portfolio solution. And so it is about best practices across that portfolio of all the lovely fibers that we wear as consumers and that brands love to design and things like that. So it was, again, a natural step in evolving and becoming part of solutions that drive change.
I love what you said about the shift, right? From becoming part of the problem to becoming part of the solutions. That's a phrase I have actually used organically, even before, even before. So there's definitely some correlation of minds. And can you tell us a little bit more about the preferred fibers? Cotton, obviously, is in the core. That's something that you started with. But what are the other preferred fibers?
Well, when we talk about preferred fibers, it's about moving along that continuum away from the status quo that is maybe chemically intensive. They're not conscious in practicing, animal welfare best practices. It may be around chemical use. And so certainly the social component. So it's about moving away from the status quo into this preferred journey to more regenerative, working on the ecosystems, working on biodiversity, addressing water, there's multiple challenges, which mean there's multiple solutions that have to be integrated into creating, solving the problems. So it is about that journey piece and establishing best practices to move. The first step is going to be reducing the harm, better management practices, more integrated pest management, to shifting in that next progression to really driving positive impacts and delivering positive change. Because there are huge opportunities when we're talking about regenerative agriculture, reduction of greenhouse gases. When we talk about all the animal fibers, for example, and the grazing that's happening there's huge opportunities when we talk about regenerative grazing practices, restorative practices for the land, multi-use crops where we're not cutting down the forest, where there's integrated land use that is building and restoring the ecosystems and the biodiversity rather than the destruction that we've been seeing in past generations. So it is about really taking those steps incrementally. And as people know, it takes time to get to those fully regenerative agricultural production system, but there's regenerative practices that start with day one. Take care of the soil. The soil will take care of you and increase the biodiversity and water utilization. So it is a step-by-step incremental approach that we have with the industry.
Yeah. You have touched upon an important topic of soil, the health of soil, right? It's one of the key commodities in a business, and you are in. And I think that there is an increased awareness of the impact the soil, the health of soil has on the wider ecosystem, right? Can you tell us a little bit more? Can you help us understand what are the specific implications between the health of soil and the biodiversity and climate change?
Well, you think about soils as the foundation of life. There's so many microbial activities and good bugs and different things that have to happen there and live there. Otherwise, you're just looking at a sterile sponge, and you can see land that has been so used up that that it truly cannot grow anything anymore. And that contributes to the desertification of our lands, and that puts more pressure on the climate. So soil truly is the foundation of where we can begin to invest or protect and invest what we already have, and move into those best practices of restorative and regenerative agriculture. Because once you have, addressing the soil, feeding the soil, supporting the soil, then you can come, one of the first steps we want to see farmers doing in other, any crop that uses the land, is to stop the use of synthetic fertilizers. These contribute to green algae blooms in our rivers and our gulfs and our oceans. And so it is about really working in balance with nature, and soil comes first. And once, that balance is found, then that builds other diversity and other biodiversity immediately for supporting the environment in that area, whether it's riparian areas or, dedicated areas for wildlife and management, and all the different things that can happen around a farm, rather than crop to crop, monocrop, systems that don't support land health. And so soil is truly the foundation of where we need to start protecting and enhancing, restoring, and using regenerative practices.
Fantastically said. Can you help me understand, and our audience, how, is the awareness of the regenerative farming and sustainable products and the whole circularity, is there awareness among your community, in a vast community? Is it increasing? Is it improving? Is it, clearly in the beginning you were a pioneer, right? At least it felt like that. And it became vastly successful. Do you think there has been a shift in mind among the farming community and the consumers and the brands?
The good news is, yes, I believe that we're seeing that, the shift, and we're close to that tipping point. What is interesting is that while there's definitely greater awareness and the mindset shift that's happening in the decision makers, there's still a lot of work to do when it comes to policy advocacy. We've got businesses that are having, an amazing organic baby line, or a, responsible man-made cellulosics, sheeting line, or whatever the case may be, but they're not having full corporate strategies. So it really is about taking these proven solutions and scaling them. And so that's where I feel like there's awareness, but there's certainly some huge obstacles that are still in the way. And one of them, we call it the price paradigm. I can't grow organic cotton on a maybe. I can't invest in soils. I can't invest in creating these dynamic changes unless I have a clear market signal that says, I'm going to give you that return on your investment. Just like that mill, they can't put in, better windows and air conditioning systems and pay fair wages if we're not willing to pay a fair price for this product, the garments and clothes that we wear. And so the business model, that price to value paradigm, we have over 640 members now in Textile Exchange, and growing rapidly, because they understand they must make changes. It's not optional anymore to have a preferred fiber strategy. But the reality is they would go 100% more preferred fibers, but the single thing that keeps them from doing that is the price. And so how do we really get beyond that price paradigm to where we understand the value of the product, and that we're buying durability, we're buying value, rather than 5 colors of this shirt. And so it really is that there's a certain percentage of consumers that get it, but there's a lot who don't. But we have, bottom line, got to change the business models in order to break the price paradigm.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we are going to talk with Maxine and Louis shortly. I would like to jump to the next question, and the final one for this segment, and it's mildly whimsical one. You have been said that if you want to change the world, you need to change your socks. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a simple thing of, it's time to take action, and it's an action you can take. Socks wear out. We all love our socks. Socks tell us a lot about us. And, my grandchildren have soccer socks and baseball socks and hiking socks. And, socks are, an integral part of our lives. But the reality is they come from a fiber. They come from a fiber. So while it may be overwhelming, I can't do anything by myself about climate change. I can't do anything. So taking it from something that's overwhelming, but like, look at what you have and what you're doing and what you're wearing. And we wear socks, all kinds of socks, but pay attention. Are they cotton? Are they wool? Are they recycled? So you can change the world by taking that action yourself, and like, pay attention to the socks you're wearing, where they come from, because someone made them, someone spun them, and it's something kids can understand. And so it is about truly, we can change the world one sock at a time, one thing at a time, one step at a time. That we need to make a start. And I feel like socks are a good place to start. And it's that common ground. We all wear socks. It's something we can do.
Yeah, button up. Fantastic segue to, thank you so much, Laria. This is a perfect segue to Maxine. So our next speaker, Maxine Bedat. Maxine, you have a wide portfolio of achievements under your belt, and your titles include entrepreneur, you have written a book, you're a writer, you have a researcher, and you are an advocate, right? And you have co-founded the ethical fashion company, Zadie. It was successful and blossoming, and then you decided to move on and start the New Standard Institute. You describe it as a think and do tank for raising the fashion industry consciousness. You have also published a book in June this year, your book Unraveled, The Life and Death of a Garment came out. And as you said, it is not just a story of a pair of jeans, but it is a story of the global economy and our role in it, right? So the first question I have for you is, I strongly believe that we all have a role to play, in shaping the future of our planet. We have to take the responsibility. We have to raise our hand, and we have to do something. We can't just complain and be negative about it, right? And it can start with socks, right? It's a perfect example. You look around your room, and you can start with that. It's about your decision making. So you have touched upon important topic. As consumers and as citizens, we have roles to play. And you said that when we label things as sustainable fashion, we ignore the most important relationship. And it is not how the garment is made, but it is our relationship to it. Can you please elaborate on it, and what needs to be done to really help people understand that they have the power? They have the credit card power, the purchase power to change things, and beyond that.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me, and for everyone that is tuning in. It's important, really, I think, for people to just see the power that they do have, both as consumers, and I think even more significantly as citizens. I talk about, we have this thing. There's no such thing as sustainable fashion, and people can get a little bit annoyed at that. But what we mean is that as you mentioned, the most important factor, the best way to reduce your impact when it comes to fashion is to not buy the thing at all. And I think that that tends to get lost in this conversation around sustainability. Is it's as Laria was mentioning, like, it will be a new line of product that a company will launch, but they're not getting to the their core business. In the same way, it's not just buying that sustainably labeled product, it's building a deeper relationship with our wardrobe, so that when we are purchasing something, it's that we actually really want it, because the biggest driver of reductions is how many times you're actually using that thing. And so if you are just keeping on buying at the same speed, but just looking for that sustainable mark, that's not going to be the best way to drive your own personal emissions. And then I think on the citizen front, I think that we're trained to see that the power that we have is through our consumerism, right? Is through our dollars, which is true. We do have a say there, But we have significant say in the laws that are passed and the people that we vote in, demanding, broader legislation and broader policy. And so it's really kind of looking at starting with your socks, as Laria said, and then, seeing that as a way to really build a deeper sense of citizenship, that we can engage and demand and ask for these broader changes that we're really going to need. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be just our sock. It's going to be that our governments address these policies on a deeper level. So we have to start with that, start with the socks, and then end with policy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's about the accumulation of actions and creating the community of all these goodwill citizens, educating them, right? And really leveraging it and changing the whole system that leads to where we need to go, which is healthy planet for people and, for the future generations to come. And anyway, you touch upon a very important topic, the overconsumption. And I think that we agree that there is a need for a shift in the consumption paradigm, right? We still lack kind of the speed and scale required to keep our promise to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. And I believe everybody knows what these goals are. Just quick reminder, they were adopted in 2015 by United Nations member states as a blueprint for sustainable and just future for all, for planet and the people, right? And these goals aim to lift people out of poverty, ensure equality, and build green and resilient economies. So we are lagging behind our promise. For example, one of the statistics I just learned that Ellen MacArthur Foundation reports say that 1 truckload of clothing continues to be burned or landfilled every second, right? It just gives you the scale of a challenge we are facing. So question to you, Maxine. What can we do to really tame the urge of want to buy newer things? The urge to buy new things all the time, and the stimulation that we are surrounded by.
Yeah, so I think you said 2 things. You said the stimulation that we're surrounded by and this urge to, the urge to shop. And I think separating those 2 things out is really how we get about doing it. Because, if you look back, and I got to do this for the research for my book, if you look back at the history of how we've gotten to this place of such a disposable relationship with clothing, is that it was very manufactured. This is not, something that is innate in us, that we think about our clothing in the same way that we think about a disposable cup of coffee. This was, starting from France's Sun King all the way through today. This idea of having fashion seasons was something that was constructed as an economic driver. And so I think just knowing that this disposability has been created as a means to develop a lot of wealth for very few people, is kind of that first sort of awareness building, that this isn't just our innate drive to shop and we should feel so guilty about it. This has been something that has been kind of imposed on us as well. But kind of on a more practical level, the things that I have done, because I got my start not on a farm, but in a mall, having been born and raised in Minnesota near the Mall of America. I knew how things were sold to me, and that was what I was exposed to. And I remember when H&M first opened in New York, and I was so excited to go there, and I just bought bags and bags of clothes without any thought. And my entry point into all of this was I had this overflowing closet in New York, and this feeling like I had nothing to wear all the time, and it was becoming very stressful. And so what I've learned to do is, and it's harder and harder because of our digital lives and digital media, but is to remove those cues of shopping. We are exposed to so much more advertising and influence than we ever have been. So what I have done is I've gone through my Instagram and I've removed like the influencers, I've removed the brands. I go through my email, I went through my email and I removed those, the brand emails, so that if you speak to a psychologist, if they talk to you about habit formation, the best thing to do is to not have to make that choice. So you're like, just remove that exposure, so that you're not, constantly being bombarded with messages to go buy something. And then I think, part of the reason in writing the book was to 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 dig through and really show, what it takes to go from Laria's brother-in-law's farm all the way to, cotton farm, all the way, to creating a pair of jeans. And what ends up happening to that is that if we can really know just the amount of resources, human, environmental, and otherwise, that goes into our things, well, like for me, I couldn't ever look at clothes the same way. You really just understand and build a much deeper connection than kind of the marketing messages that we normally just receive.
So what is the role of media and influencers in this? Because clearly it's as you said, it's education and self-awareness of what is it that I want to do and how do I create this good habit, the positive habit that I'm comfortable with and proud of my footprint. But there is also this pressure from the influencers and media, right? That like, how do we engage them? What do we need to do to really change the trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit on it really well, that influencers play an enormous role. And I think we all, know kind of the enormous amounts, sums of money that the top influencers can receive from a post. But what is less kind of known is how central a role these influencers play for the, explosive growth of the most disposable fashion companies. They're really, when you like sit in on their earnings calls, they're talking about how their influencers are driving their sales. And so, I do think it is up to, influencers to really understand and see the role that they play, and that they are part of the system. If they're, being paid, money to shell out these brands, they are part of the system and have a responsibility to, be responsible players. And media, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, media, likewise, I think it's been really good to see fashion media, from when I got started, in this field, there has been a shift in fashion media. It's beginning to get more coverage. The impact of the industry, it might need to still have more central coverage than it does. But they do, they have a responsibility. They're all part of like fueling this, consumption cycle that we're on. And so, both media and influencers, we're getting into a world where those are kind of interchangeable things, especially when it's related to fashion media. And they have a central role in communicating and influencing us. Like, that's what they are called. They influence.
Yeah. You mentioned it. There needs to be an increased accountability, right? And because they have an influence, and it comes with an obligation. And almost, there should be considered some kind of a ranking system on sustainability of the influencers, to put a little bit of pressure and like add some kind of you have to cross match it, right? Of course, they show what we like and what we enjoy, but there has to be this added layer, I feel, of forcing them to educate themselves and take ownership of what they are promoting and selling, helping to sell. Anyway, to your book, we are shifting to. And by the way, I have looked at the New York City library portal yesterday because I recommended a friend of mine to to borrow your book, and there's 10-week wait for your book. Okay, so you are it's indeed a hot commodity. So you mentioned already Karl Pepper, Laria's brother-in-law. Can you tell me a little bit more how you got to know him, and why did you decide to include his story in the book?
Yeah, so I wrote the book really partly for selfish reasons. Was that I knew that in transitioning to the role at the New Standard Institute, I was going to be offering advice and guidance. And I thought that to do that, I needed to understand firsthand what was happening in the fashion industry. So I started with the farm. My very first trip was going to visit Carl Pepper, Laria's brother-in-law. And what I wanted to do was understand Carl's journey. I think as someone that is in Brooklyn and has not been near a farm, we tend to have ideas of like, why are people doing things or not doing them? And I think we are very judgmental of like, why aren't all farmers organic? Isn't it the obvious thing to do? How are like, look at those evil non-organic farmers. And so I wanted to understand like what drives a farmer to either go more regenerative or ones that don't. And so it was through another brother-in-law of Laria's that I managed to find Carl. You guys have cornered the organic market. So I found my way there, and Carl introduced me to a friend of his who is a conventional cotton farmer, so I could really understand. And it was incredibly eye-opening because even Carl himself, having had very personal connections and inspired by Laria, I should note, but having personal connections with loss, believed to be due to the chemical use on his family's farm. I saw the journey that he took, but I also saw that it's a risky journey and you don't know what's going to be at the other end. And it takes 3 years to get organic certified. And you don't know, you don't know what the market is going to be at the end of that. And so I also understood kind of the, if brands, if companies are not moving to these preferred fibers, are not making these guarantees, we're not going to be able to, we can't ask farmers to take on additional risk. I also realized in speaking to all of the farmers that I spoke to, like, just, your whole livelihood is dependent on the weather. Like, it's such a foreign concept to me. Like, if it rains for me, I close the window, I'm still on my computer, nothing changes. But I really got to see, and through the story of the book, from the farm to the textile mill, through the cut and sew factory, through the end of life, looking at the donation system and the waste stream, like real people's lives are at stake, and we have to create the right incentives all along the way in order for the right thing to happen. We can't just like pray that it does.
Well said. Back to you, or further zooming in on your book and how it came about. You have traveled the world, right? While you were researching for your book and gathering the stories, gathering the material. And you have visited Bangladesh, China, Ghana, and other countries, other places. Can you please share with us some stories that resonated with you the most powerful stories you have encountered?
It's hard because they're all powerful, and there's every step along the way. There were powerful, very moving stories. I was very moved by by Carl's journey and how his tinkering spirit has really helped him really change, revolutionize practices on his own farm. I think I did my research in the same, story of the gene. So I started in Texas and then I went to China. And that was my first trip to mainland China. And just, to see, going into these textile cities, you're just your nose. And I was pregnant at the time, so it was a bit stressful. Like, it smells acrid. The rivers that you pass are all variety colors of gray, black, and glistening. And I remember I managed to get myself I said I was a buyer, and I managed to finagle my way into a denim wash house, and I then went to the back of the wash house and just saw the effluents there, just pouring into the rivers. And one image that I won't forget is walking along the banks of this black, acrid, glistening river were farm plots. There was a woman there tending to her farm, and that was the water that she was using. And I remember, I went to go try to look into the water, and I almost slipped in, and I was with a colleague, and she just screamed behind me. She's like, being pregnant was not you don't want to slip into that sludge. But I couldn't, just imagine that this is the food that people are consuming. And then, from there to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka is where I went to go look at the cut and sew components of the garment industry. And just at each stage, I thought, China, the rivers were black, and then the people told me, no, this is a clean river, and I was like, I don't understand what you're saying. How's this clean? But then when I went to Bangladesh, I saw what they meant. There was a new level of blackness to the rivers. And there, I got to speak to garment workers, and one of the stories, this was in Sri Lanka, that sticks with me and I think about every day, is the story of Danu, a woman, a female garment worker, and most garment workers are women. And you tend to find garment work in kind of the areas where there is a lot of immigration, where kind of people can be most exploited. So it's the cheapest type of labor. And this, woman, Danu, was explaining to me about her day. And she told me that she was a day laborer. And, I thought oh, well, that's good. It provides flexibility because she had family far away that she needed to see. And she told me that, she kind of didn't seem very pleased with the situation. And what I found out from that interview was that these day labor agencies come pick these women up. Sometimes they are brought to factories. Sometimes they are told when they are already in those vans, there's no work in the factory, and they will be working at a massage parlor. And that was an interview that I won't forget, and Danu will be a woman I will not forget. And I think it's those kind of stories that just stick with me, that certainly fuel the fire of wanting to make those policy changes. We can't just develop an industry that evades any law, and goes to where we can exploit land and labor the most. And then kind of at the end of I spent time also back in the US at distribution facilities at Amazon, and that was also quite harrowing, just to see the actual day-to-day work of a garment worker and an Amazon distribution worker is very similar, in that everything is micro-managed by the second. And I look back in history to understand where these practices first started, this kind of measuring mechanized labor, where you measure and maximize the most amount of labor and measure it, in very small increments. And that got its start in the times of slavery on farms. And to see that link, to see that we're still using this kind of labor in the US and throughout the apparel supply chain is also, so I could go on. But I think then finally, just in Ghana, that lasting impression that I had was being at the top of this burning landfill filled with textile waste, and you could see the various labels of the different brands that I have owned throughout time, and seeing it all just burn up in flames after some of it still had its tags on. and running away from that flame, thinking like, well, this would just be a dumb way to die. But what a waste! What a waste!
Thank you so much, Maxine. And these are the powerful stories that need to be told and heard. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing them, and invite everyone to read your book. We need to understand that these stories are part of the cycle of our growth, right? And it's even, it's not just this beautiful new thing that we feel great about but it's, it started somewhere, which it is having very different phase. Well, now we are moving on to Louis Perkins. Louis, welcome to our conversation. Let me introduce you. You are known as a committed advocate for doing the right thing. What a title, right? Fantastic. And you have been recently appointed as president of the Apparel Impact Institute, also known as AII. And prior to joining the institute, you were a president of the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute, where you led the Fashion Positive Initiative. And I have seen in the comments and chat stream that people are interested in understanding a little bit more about the Cradle and Cradle work and integration in your current work. So we will dive into that shortly. But before we do so, I just want to say hi. Where are you calling from?
Hi there. I'm calling from the Bay Area of San Francisco.
Okay, we are all envious. Excellent to have you here. And the first question is about the genesis of the Apparel Impact Institute, right? The Institute is about collaboration of brands, manufacturers, industry associations that came together to select, fund, and scale high-impact projects that improve the sustainability outcomes of the apparel and footwear industry. So how did it come about? How was it set up?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking that. And thank you for the introduction, and hello to my panelists as well, and to everyone listening. So it's great that you mentioned that I'd recently been appointed, and I thought it is kind of recent, but in a sense it's not. I actually just hit the 3-year milestone. AII was publicly launched almost 4 years ago, but it really didn't kind of come into its maturity, and I was brought on board late summer of 2018. But of course, we've had such an unusual last few years that we're sort of in this time warp. As you identified, the purpose of AII was that a group of brands initially who were working on measuring impact and trying to improve their impact recognized that we can measure, but we also need to dual track and accelerate solutions. Like, we can't just be saying this is where we want to go, and we're finding a way to create more transparency around what we're doing, which is critical, by the way. That is really important to, when you know better, you do better. So the knowledge is step one for certain, and there's levels of it, right? Because we're unraveling, so to speak, levels of knowledge base, right? And I think that's what's interesting about, once you kind of go into a new area, then you start to say, now we can look at how do you define impact, and what is impact, and do we have solutions that can be proven? And so this group of brands that came together recognize that if we look at and identify what exists already, the things that we know we're ready to scale, then we can start to work together faster, particularly in a supply chain that is shared. This is not a vertically integrated supply chain like many other industries, where the manufacturing is oftentimes owned by the brand or the retailer. In this case, as we all know, it's a very interesting, complicated, and vast web of small businesses, medium-sized, and large enterprises that are making apparel. So the only way to go really about this systematically is to do it together. And I think that was the other key piece, was aligning that all this project work needs to accelerate, and where are the pre-competitive intersections where we can take that on and we can do this together. So we were fortunate enough to receive some philanthropic funding along with brand sustainability budgets that started to be aligned and come together as sort of a pooled approach. And so that's the origin story of us. And the idea was that anything that could be measurable impact, anything that we say, with this intervention, with this standard, with this program, best practices, solution, we can measure the improvement around water, chemistry, carbon, et cetera. And as we look at that, there's sort of two levels to do it. There's the reduction of the less bad, and I'm borrowing from some of my cradle to cradle framework. And you want to identify what we're doing that has a negative impact. You want to reduce that negative impact, but at the same time, we have to flip it to positive impact. And that's where we all know that the current models of production consumption, you can slow down some of the bad, but if you don't flip the paradigm into positive impact, regenerative impact in systems, then we're actually not going to be able to make the mark or the targets that we're trying to reach, which is to reduce all the negative impact of this industry.
Oh, okay. You have mentioned so many important things, right? It's you have to pay attention to digest. So I have, there are a couple of keywords that jump out. Responsible consumption, production and consumption, the energy, water, chemistry, materials. All this your key values and focus areas. So can you? I come to this conversation from the perspective of the Sustainable Development Goals advocate, right? So, what is the correlation? How do you see? How do you use the Sustainable Development Goals? And is it well known within your network, within your circuit? And how do you work to? How do you leverage the platform that you have built and the Sustainable Development Goals for better good?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think at the highest level, we look at what we are trying to achieve as a humanity, as a society, and we look at those SDGs as the direction that we're heading. And that's true for me personally, and it's true for this organization. So to be able to frame those goals as the direction of movement for all of our work is the way that kind of keeps us all working together. And it's how we partner with people to say, are we moving in the same direction? Are we pointing this towards the same common goal? And the SDGs lay that out. Then when you start to peel down into those 17 SDGs, we have specific targets that we're trying to reach within these areas. And so the easiest one for me to talk about is climate and carbon, because that's the one that we're really leaning in on and doubling down on at AII, which is this industry target of reducing our CO2 emissions by 45% by the year 2030. Some brands and manufacturers will go higher, some might be a little lower, but as a collective, we need to aim for that. And so what I always say is that the Apparel Impact Institute doesn't necessarily set the targets or goals. We work with individual organizations, brands, retailers, manufacturers, and even programs and other partners to help move towards those stated industry goals too. And I'll just say on a personal note, when I was in the Copenhagen Fashion Summit this might have been 2015 or 2016, and the Youth Summit came out on the stage, and some of you may have been there or seen the recording, because several years now they've maintained that Youth Summit gathering, where they protested against us working in the fashion industry, and particularly the brands, I think, more than the NGOs, but all of us, to say, if you're not accelerating your work towards the SDGs, we do not want to be a part of your industry. And these were a lot of design students, future business students. These would be the people that would be running companies. And so what that also points to is, if not working inside of the existing big industry, then there's room for disruption. And that a lot of these young people we're now seeing are creating a lot of the new solutions and disrupting the industry. And so I'll just say, from an SDG perspective, it not only helps AII and our partners to understand where we can point the existing industry, but I think the SDGs are also fostering this level of disruption and innovation that it's critical as well. And you need both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the young generation, the kids, right, their awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals is very high, because they understand that they understand something is wrong, and it's their future that is not looking good. And just living it on the home front, my daughter, 10 years old, she comes home and she knows all the SDGs, and she's very conscious of them. And whenever I order something, I usually buy things online. She's like, "Mom, do you really need this?" That's the first question, right? So she's questioning this elementary need to buy something, and do I really need what I bought? So there is I don't want to to lighten it too much, but you're absolutely right? There is this generation, young new generation that sees it as an absolute priority. And that brings me the next question that you touch upon a little bit, the COP26 in Glasgow, right? We are about 5 weeks away from that. It was a long journey, very exciting journey, and it's almost there. And you as AII, you have done quite substantive work relatively recently on carbon. Can you drill down and unpack it for us?
Sure, absolutely. And I think we're just getting started. So you're right. It is relatively recent. It is the beginning still, which is exciting, I think, from a perspective of the momentum that we can now lean into around this. And as Laria and Maxine have pointed out, I think the industry is more awake around these issues, and now it is the leaning into the action, right? So when we launched AII, the intent was that we would identify proven solutions and bring them to scale. And that we would, and I think in our mission statement, and you said it, we would identify, fund, scale, and then measure solutions. So the first area that we knew worked was the wet processing improvements program, the mill improvement programs, you hear them called. And our initial program that we brought in was launched at the NRDC called Clean by Design. And the goal was to say, it's challenging for brands and manufacturers to join multiple programs that may also be very similar, and to get budget approved, and to try to staff and resource multiple programs. And so to have one sort of central arbiter of, let's look at mill improvement, let's look at the various programs that are out there by region. Do they say the same thing? Are they using the best practices? Are they the best set of recommendations? Are they yielding the same carbon emission reductions? And are they priced similarly? And the answer was no, they were not, but they could be. And when we start to align an agreement around a set of, this is what energy, water, and chemical efficiency looks like in the wet processing of fabrics, and we can agree, then we can start to scale those solutions alongside each other. So carbon has been a big leader in the opening the gate of that, because these energy efficiency programs or mill improvement programs can reduce carbon by up to 10% by facility. And so knowing that, then it's a great starting point, but it's only the starting point, because as we know, when we mentioned 45% carbon emission reduction is the strategy. So what AII is now doing is looking at, if that is an entry point, what are the other areas that we need to drive the industry around? And so soon to be released is a report with the World Resource Institute around the roadmap to carbon zero for the industry. We've been working on that with them. They're the lead organization, but AII has been working and helping to bring partners like Textile Exchange, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and ZDHC and others into the review of that report. And I say all that because what it's going to point us toward is 7 key levers, 3 that are very much focused on materials, material efficiency, preferred materials, and next generation materials. 3 that are focused on the energy at production, which is energy efficiency, the elimination of the use of coal, and the scaling of renewables. And under all of it are circularity models and systems that reinforce all of those 6 I mentioned above. So when you say, you guys are really leaning in on the carbon front, we are, and we're developing out work streams, pilots, and programs around really all of those areas. We'll work very closely with Textile Exchange, Fashion for Good, and others around the material side. And then when it comes to the energy within the production facilities, around the 3 levers that I mentioned, efficiency, coal elimination, and renewables, there's a whole host of programs and partners that we work with to kind of, again, the same way we were looking at the mill improvement, let's start bringing all of these initiatives closer together and start looking at systematically rolling out these programs by region, by facilities, by industrial parks, so that we can start to, again, identify, fund, scale, and measure. It's almost a systematic approach year over year towards 45% reduction, and then on to our end goal of net zero.
Okay, thank you so much. Fantastic stuff. And let me just reflect a bit here. We have heard powerful story, right? There's so much going on within your fields, within your institutes, and even in your networks. how the fashion industry is innovating, driving action, driving change, that there are solutions that are applicable and meaningful, and that can lead us to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, right? But I just feel that there is a fragmentation. There is not sufficient knowledge of what is happening, who is doing what. It's not easy to really scale it up, get it the notch that it needs to really have the impact, right? That the impact that needs. And I think by creating the community, by bringing a little bit more transparency of who is doing what, where, on what topic is essential. And I would like to invite everyone to have a look at the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network. It is a platform. It is an open platform, accessible to all, free for all, that exists, that is embedded at the United Nations Department of Economic Social Affairs. It's a database that invites everyone within the fashion, lifestyle, textile industry to tell us what you do, right? And the objective is to showcase action, report progress, and share solutions. So you feel you are not alone. You don't have to run this all alone. Look around, in your geographic location, look around across the field you are working on, look at whatever excites you, and and connect. And so please look at the network. And I would like to ask our colleagues at the Earth Network to share the link to the Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Network via the chat, so everybody has a chance to look at it. And I just would like to. This is exciting conversation. We can go on for much longer, but it's 1:00, and I would like to just reflect on a few comments that came in, and maybe ask the last question before we give it back to Shelley. So maybe I can just share the question. What is your call to action? What would you like to leave the audience with? And what is it that you would like to highlight at the end of the conversation? And while you are thinking about it, I'm gonna try to go through some of the topics that some of the comments that came through. All right. People are joining from across the whole world. We have Bangladesh, we have Peru, we have people say, Andrea is saying that she finds it very difficult to educate my children to a low consumerism. I feel it's very difficult to, and I'm being considered eco-pain, right, in the ass. Okay, so so I feel your pain. Usually the kids are my children are dedicating the criticism and questioning to me, not to their choices of items, right? So but there are tons of tools that have been developed and campaigns that are kids friendly within the UN system, really increasing the education. It's about education, right? It's separating the need and want. And I would like to share, hopefully we'll be able to share in this call or on the following platforms, some of the campaigns and tools that have been developed addressing specifically the youngest children, and how they perceive the goals and how they can interact and integrate. So help you through that process. There are some questions regarding the role of small and medium businesses. There is, there are young people, we have touched upon that, not sufficient. That would be great if we had a little bit more time to really delve deeper. Legislation, there needs to be a change in normative setting. That important topic we didn't have a chance to discuss. But again, I feel that once we have sufficient numbers, the strength is in numbers, right? We have to create a community. And if industry communicates with a voice, doesn't have to be necessarily unified, but a voice that is able to communicate, articulate like what is it need, what the industry needs, what are the barriers that needs to be removed, normative barriers, and to achieve the SDGs. Then we have something to communicate. We have a great grant for based on conversations with the member states. Yeah, there is importance, praise of our amazing speakers. No surprise there. Okay, so maybe we can go to the final question. Maxine, I will start with you. You're in my upper left corner.
Sure. So I think that in terms of what people can do, it's, whatever motivates them. But, I think stressing regulation, and that's the area that we've really started to zero in on at New Standard Institute is, what are the regulations that need to be put in place so that a company isn't uncompetitive by doing the right choice. And so I think that we need to, some see the organizational landscape as fragmented. I don't at all. I think that there is a role and a purpose for all of the organizations, and whatever your way into them is the right one. But I think that part of that landscape will need to be legislation, so that it creates the floor, that it's government coming in and saying we're not going to be the Wild West. Just like in the US, we have fuel efficiency standards that has really made the car industry make progress. We have to do the same within the apparel industry. We can't just have the Wild West where the industry will go wherever it can exploit the greatest. And so I think if there's one thing I would advocate across all of them, but kind of one area to really focus in on would be policy work and showing your voice, because I think people don't realize that it is going on. Instead of signing up to the brand, sign up to the newsletters of the panelists here, and learn about what they're doing and help participate and advance that work, because that's the kind of journey that you can be on, that it's not just one decision. It's kind of a lifestyle of engaging as a deeper citizen with these issues. And that's how we're going to get the policy change. And we did just see policy change. SB 62 is supporting garment workers in California. It just passed yesterday. And that was thanks to people, that were, people like, in the audience, supporting the organizations that were advancing that. And that's how it happened. And that's how we can really make policy change and change across the industry.
That is a great example. Thank you, Maxine. And I have to say that you're right. We all need to be the activists, right? We have to be activists, communicating. We have this tremendous social media platforms. We have access, and it is important to leverage that and push for the normative change. And there is one. Now I was giving you notice that we can go a little bit over the time, so I'm going to extend this conversation a slightly bit. And while we are still with Maxine, I would like to read another question that came from Nancy. She says, I think H&M, you mentioned H&M as one example of a fast fashion brand. It's picked on because it does open up about changes and it's trying to make, right? It makes it an easy target. How can they scale these changes up so they can occur fast enough to make a difference?
So I think that H&M gets picked on because it's a fast fashion company. I think, you get H&M, Zara, Boohoo, Shein, they're kind of seen as a big driver of the problem because of their business model. I think H&M has done significant work, and has made very strong commitments, which has in many ways made it an advanced player in that space. But I think what people are questioning there is, how can we ever create a sustainable system that is predicated on disposability? Even if you have the cotton that is grown with the best regenerative practices. First of all, how can you afford to do that every step of the way and still at the end of the day produce a garment that's less than a cup of coffee? So I think that's why, you know, the disposable fashion companies are being targeted. So I think that, you know, we do have to have some, you know, I get the benefit of being able to, you know, point to the elephants in the room. We have to have those hard conversations of like, what are the business models, and is it going to be disposable fashion? Or is it going to be, you know, more enlightened fashion? And I guess like I think it's important to stress that those disposable like fashion companies, they are only a few, right? I could like name them, you know, in one hand. So it's not representative of the entire industry, but we do really have to think of what is the industry we want of the future, right? We're all going to be wearing clothes, and I don't think, like, to me, it's a very empowered thing to think about. It's not about need versus want. Like, if you actually, you know, I got to spend time with shoppers for the book. Like, if you spend any time, or even in one's own head, like, the relationship that people have to their closets is a very stressful one. So actually rebuilding that relationship and taking that power back and loving your clothes and not being so kind of exposed to just the marketing can be a very positive relationship. So I know I veered off the question of H&M, but I think it's a bigger issue about disposability, and I don't know that the commitments that they can make. I don't want to pick on H&M because they are leaders, you know, in certain respects for sure. But if you're building on a disposable model, if you're ever going to be able to achieve the significant targets that we need to live on a thriving planet.
Okay, Maxine, thank you so much. I am aware that Louis has to leave us shortly. So before he goes, first of all, thank you so much for joining the conversation. And I would love to give you a floor for a couple of seconds to just wrap it up and say goodbye to us.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I wish we had more time, and we'll do it again. I think, you know, as I'm thinking about all the many parts that we're identifying and all the many aspects of this work, you know, my brain was going a little bit to the highest level of the remembering of what we're here to do. And it's like, okay, what is the call to action? Because everyone who's listening plays a different role, right? Somebody might be working at a bank. Somebody might be a parent. Someone might be inside an apparel company. Somebody might be in a renewable energy business. You know, we're all here because we're drawn to this topic for some reason or another. And we opened up, I think Shelley opened up with about what an interesting and fun and creative and beautiful industry this is. It's an art form. And I always like to say art is a reflection of the time in which it's being produced. I studied art history in college. I loved it because of the historical reference points. Maxine did such a beautiful job in her book about reminding us of the origin story, Laria's origin story. There's a lot of stories. And at the end of the day, it's all about sort of us, the human collective, who've been entrusted with this beautiful planet and the soil and the ocean and all these many, many, many pieces that make up the whole of the sum. And it's ours to protect, but also we've done a nice job of creating a great deal of pain and suffering on this planet as a result of the way we make and produce and create economic value in industry. And this is the time, I think, for us as a society to look at these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and to say, this is about being part of a great healing. This is about a time to undo, to unravel the things that we have done. And so for me, the call to action is, what is your gift? What do you do? What can you unlock? What is your role? Find it, do it, be brave, go boldly, speak up. That's what I think the call to action is.
Great closing words. Thank you so much, Louis. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks. And now we are moving to Laria. Please,
Yeah, I would just echo what Louis said. It's like it is about living in the moment, being present tense, and being really conscious about how we're living and what we're doing. Spending a little time with my grandchildren here in Texas, and my 10-year-old granddaughter goes, Mimi, this is a single-use plastic. Did you know that single-use plastics do all this? So I think the key really is about education and learning, and it's making sure we as influencers and people that we have that influence is something all of us have. Now, how we choose to use that influence may be questionable, but if we are truly embodying what we believe, then it is along that journey we're going to touch people's lives. And so it is about making sure that we are equipped, that we're able to inspire others and come with solutions, that there are choices. Don't get stuck. It can be, like I've said before, it can be something as simple as change your socks. When you change those socks, change it to something that is there. And to Maxine's point, it's like we really have to be a different kind of consumer. We have to be really aware of where things come from. And so that awakening, that further getting consumers to engage in their beliefs and what they believe. So I think it's about being present tense on our journey.
Thank you so much. And with that, a great conversation. I have learned a lot. What a pleasure being with all of you. And now we are giving floor back to Shelley for the closing of the panel.
Thank you very much. On behalf of earthday.org and our partner, the Conscious Fashion Campaign, Fashion and Lifestyle Network, I want to thank our wonderful moderator today and our fabulous panelists for contributing their knowledge, their insight, and their wisdom on this important subject of fashion and sustainability. And also thank you to David Mecker in Washington, D.C. for carrying this panel out so well, so smoothly. Thank you, David. Please visit our partners' website, consciousfashioncampaign.com, and our panelists' websites, which are textileexchange.org, apparelimpact.org, newstandardinstitute.org, and I might suggest also reading Maxine Bédot's book, Unravel, The Life and Death of a Garment, which is just a great book. And of course, please do visit earthday.org for an in-depth look at all of Earth Day's campaigns on every environmental issue. Thank you so much for being here today, all of you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.